Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 182. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com. So we're welcoming back to the show the famed writer and artist, Caleb Palmquist. Caleb,
hi.
How you doing? Welcome back.
Good. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, and you're here to talk to us about your next Kickstarter for Unicorn Vampire Hunter, but you're doing something a little bit different. You're actually having issues 4 and 5 coming out in this Kickstarter.
That's right.
That is awesome. Okay, so what was is it you got too many stories to tell and you're just trying to kind of consolidate them a bit? So what was the story on doing issues 4 and 5 together for this one?
Overconfidence, hubris. I wanted to finish the first story arc. I had seen some other creators have success doing the final 2 issues as one Kickstarter.
Okay.
The big inspiration is Curtis Clow, who does Beastlands. He did his issue 4 and 5 together, and that was very successul. And I'm always telling Curtis that I just copy everything that he does. But I'm kind of going a little bit above and beyond just offering issue 4 and 5, because on this campaign I'm also offering a one-shot Dungeons and Dragons adventure that is another story in canon that takes place during the events of issue 5.
Really?
So essentially another issue's worth of story. Yep.
So my question for you, Caleb, is this a parallel story? So these are brand new characters that people can play, or are they able to play any canon characters established already in issues 1 through 3?
So on my last campaign, last year, I actually did a role-playing game starter guide, which gave rules for how to play as the main canon characters. So in this new one-shot, you could play as the existing characters if you wanted to, but I'm also including information on how to create your own characters or play as new characters that are basically other creatures of the magical marsh that are sent on this mission that coincides with the events of what's happening in issue number 5.
Okay. So you don't have any basic player archetypes that are part of this adventure story? Pre-made characters?
Oh, yeah, no, there are 4 pre-made characters that will be in the new adventure. So the 4 playable characters that we have included are a centaur, a pixie, a satyr, and a hedgehog.
Okay. So when you decide to draft out this adventure, why are these named characters, or are these a generic centaur that someone can play, a generic satyr, a generic hedgehog, or are these named characters?
They are. They have names. They don't. Okay. They appear in the background of previous issues. They were in issue 2, and they will be in issue 5, but they're not named in the regular comic. They're like background characters because in the story of Unicorn Vampire Hunter, all the characters live in this place called the Magical Marsh, which is protected from evil forces, and it's basically a commune of different magical creatures that live in peace there. So you've got all the classic sort of woodland creatures that live there. Right.
So now, I know we talked about it last episode when you were talking about getting your characters, and you had in those 5th edition character sheets made. Now, talk to us about how you integrated the magic system, like the 5th edition magic system, into your adventure.
I mean, the thing is that Unicorn Vampire Hunter is like a classic fairy tale, so the magic of Dungeons and Dragons works pretty well. I honestly, when we were creating the character sheets for like Seamus the Wizard And Isadora, who is a marsh nymph, but she's a druid. Like,
Right.
it was very easy to just pull spells that already existed, and we didn't really
Okay.
have to invent a whole lot. But yeah, I guess the major thing that we invented is the rules for changing into a unicorn. But anyone who's familiar with D&D, there's like a lot of lycanthropy in D&D, like werewolves and jackal wares and all that kind of thing, were ravens, and it's very similar to that. I mean, you know, I should probably brag about how tough it was to integrate our it's a lot of work. You know, D&D is such like a versatile system that it was it felt like a natural fit.
Right. Okay. For those that are listening or watching this that have collected issues 1 through 3, what can they expect in issues 4 and 5?
Okay, so issue 4 is, I think, my favorite issue.
Okay.
I mean, I like all of the issues, but issue 4 I've really been looking forward to because this only very minor spoiler, but at the end of issue 3, Edward goes looking for his father, and so issue 4 is like very much like a side quest, because the way I think of it is always like, you know, Obi-Wan Kenobi going off on his own adventure, the B story. But so Edward, but he's going to find his father at the castle where he grew up, but the thing is, like, a lot of time has passed, and the castle is not the same place, and his father is not the same person, and
Okay.
so discovering that and learning new things about his past is all part of issue 4, and issue 4 is easily the darkest issue of the series so far. And then issue 5 brings everything to a head. So in issue 4, we're following Edward. We're just following Edward on his adventure. But then in issue 5, we're like, well, what was happening with Isadora and Seamus and Jezebel and the witch and Enrique? And we know that for those of you who have read issue 3 left off on quite a cliffhanger, but issue 4 doesn't answer any of those questions. Issue 5 does, and issue 5 brings issue 5 brings it back all together, and that's also a little bit of the reason why we're doing issue 4 and 5 together, and it's also the reason that I felt comfortable with not answering those questions in issue 4, because you're going to get issue 4 and 5 at the same time, and
at the same time.
Yeah. So issue 5 ties it back together. It's the big climax. All of the, well, I should say there are 3 major scenes that really put a bow on some emotional character arcs and relationship arcs. And then the issue 5 ends with setting up for the next arc, because of course we're not done. But it is the conclusion of the story that I wrote 10 years ago, when I originally wrote the draft of Unicorn Vampire Hunter. It was called Jezebel and the Unicorn, and the story I wrote actually ends with issue 5.
Okay.
So in a lot of ways, issue 5 is the culmination of something I've been working on for a long, long time, but it also opens the door to something brand new, which I'm really excited about.
Okay. So you had a really good piece of advice that you gave a couple episodes ago about making your titles be based off of what your story is about.
Yeah.
So as you're working on Unicorn Vampire Hunter and Vampire Detective in Space, do you have like you said, are you hinting at a new project or a new storyline in one of these established?
What I'm talking about now is that there's another storyline. Like there will be issue 6, 7, and so on. I've plotted out. I want to say 15 issues of Unicorn Vampire Hunter. But to your point about naming things, yeah, I mean, I have several projects that are kind of in the works, and I've really thought about, how can I pitch the book just with the title. And I think a lot of the success of Unicorn Vampire Hunter has come out of the title, because I don't even need to show anyone the book. If I tell them what the title is, they're already conjuring images in their head. And then, of course, when they do see the book, it's beautiful. So,
Right. So with this Kickstarter, as we said, you're doing issues 4 and 5 together. What are some of the new things that the audience and your readers can expect within this Kickstarter?
Like, what are some of the rewards?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's issue 4 and 5 with the standard versions. And then we have variant covers. We have 2 variant covers for each issue. We had David Brame, who's done variant covers for every single issue of the series. It did one for 4 and 5. And then a new guest artist, Matthew Warlick, did some really beautiful and spooky covers for number 4 and 5. And those are available as add-ons or parts of bundles. And then we've got the RPG book, obviously. And then we have a new sticker, which by the time this podcast goes out, the images of that sticker will be on the campaign. And then we've got 2 new trading cards, and I've done trading cards on every campaign since Unicorn Vampire Hunter number 1, including the other books that I've done. And I keep trying to not do trading cards, but I did a survey of my email list asking people what rewards they were interested in, and so many people wanted me to keep the trading cards. And so the collection of Unicorn Vampire Hunter trading cards just keeps growing. I think I want to say there are going to be like 14 now, maybe.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah. And then there's a few other odds and ends, but the big highlights are issue 4, issue 5, RPG. There's some the biggest one that I completely forgot about is we're doing this fantastic collector's box. So, we've got this really high quality, soft touch, magnetically sealing collector's box with a cover that was actually painted by Jeremy Therese.
Okay.
Who's a really awesome artist that I've been working with since the very beginning of my comic book career. And so I'm super excited about that. It's a box that will be a beautiful display piece and can hold all your issues of Unicorn Vampire Hunter. So that's kind of the big ticket item. And when I did my survey of my email list, asking them what kind of rewards they wanted, that was the number 1 most popular item, was this collector's box. So,
and that also in there that also comes with a print as well, like any.
Yeah. We have a print of a map that was made by Clifton Chandler, who's a map designer of the Magical Marsh, and so I'm going to be offering that print with some of the levels on the campaign. So the map was included in the RPG starter guide that I did last year that will still be available on this campaign. But I thought it would be cool to offer that as a print add-on. Okay.
And now Daryl Toe is still drawing it too, as well.
Oh yeah, Daryl is still drawing it. I've somehow tricked him into sticking around. he's currently drawing issue number 5 as the campaign progresses. He's drawing it, and I've already pitched the second arc of the story to Daryl. That would be issue 6 through 10, and he's on board for that. So as long as I can keep tricking him into drawing for me, then he'll be sticking around.
Right. And we talked about this last time, but I'm just curious as well, as like, will we see, maybe not us as a reader since we haven't been in your head, but have you seen issues 4 and 5, any of the stories change from your initial outline based off of either reader feedback or Daryl's feedback on how things should change? So how much has the story arc changed from your first inception of the idea?
Since I first came up with the idea, like 10 years ago, it's changed a lot.
Okay.
In fact, issue number 4 is honestly, I don't know, like, I almost don't want to say this, it's going to ruin my cred as a writer, but the idea for issue 4 is Daryl's.
Okay.
He was like, what if Edward goes and sees his father, and then I don't like what happens next is like a little bit of a spoiler, but the basis of the idea was Daryl's, and then I kind of fleshed it out from there. And then in issue number 5, the big final climax is something that I had envisioned a long time ago, but the exact way that it plays out has changed a lot. And I had a lot of long conversations with Daryl. I had a lot of long conversations with a couple of friends of mine who have been beta readers. The fates of the various characters have changed a lot over time, but the core of the story is still there. Yeah.
No, so I guess my question too for you then is, for follow-up to that, did some of the story change based off of story flow or based off of target audience?
That's a tough question. A little bit on target audience. What I'll say is this is an all ages story, but as we get into issue 4 and 5, it does get darker. I have pulled back on some of the darkest elements, although the character arcs I think do get pretty raw. I would say that most of the changes were for the benefit of the characters, like what's going to be the most convincing character development. And my goal always when I'm writing is that I want the person reading the story to cry. That's my number one goal. And I am like a softie. When I was younger, I used to say I never cried during movies and stuff. And now I'll cry during a commercial. So I cry at the drop of a hat, but I really want the relationships between the characters to be meaningful. And so that's where most of the changes have come from.
And you had Dave Lentz, your letterer. He's been an integral part in this as well.
Oh, yeah. No, of course. Dave is notorious for never reading my scripts until he's literally lettering the comic. But then he will make changes as he's lettering because he decides that, that he can write the dialogue better. And sometimes he's right. No, he's... Dave is a huge influence, and he really makes the difference in the final delivery of the product.
And so, how much of I remember what you're talking about? Some advice that you would give to other comic book writers is to find your own Daryl and to find your own Dave as well, to make a successful comic. Yeah. just to now that you're on episode as far as now you're on issues 4 and 5. You also have some other successful ones. What are some of the advice you would give to a comic writer right now that you wished you knew on issues 1 and 2?
Use BackerKit. I wasn't using that at first. Now BackerKit's launched their own crowdfunding platform, but it's just like such a huge help. There's a lot of little tools that I didn't have that I wasn't using. Honestly, like I couldn't possibly give anyone advice or myself advice about how to make a comic that people are going to want to read. I still don't know. But I could give plenty of advice about the business of making and fulfilling comics, because that's the really time intensive part. I mean, the amount of work that I was talking to Miles Greb, who writes After the Gold Rush. And we were talking about, the most time intensive part of doing this whole Kickstarter gig is fulfilling books. I mean, after I get done talking to you, I'm going to go try to knock out a bunch more for my last campaign, shipping books out to people. And there's just a lot of tools that make that easier and faster. BackerKit is one of them. And then, just like good organization and, and I would say, I guess if I was trying to give some like really earnest, like sort of cheesy advice, it'd be like, be grateful, because it can be easy to get bogged down in like the business of everything and be like, oh, well, the reason that I'm spending hours and hours and hours and hours, like, getting tape all over my fingers is because, 500 people wanted to buy this thing that I made, which is pretty great. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. And also too, it's to your tier level. You're pretty famous in putting in early birds as well. Are you? Is there any early bird? No,
I'm not. I'm not. So this is actually, I did some early birds in my very early campaigns,
right?
But earlier I said that Curtis, who does Beastlands, I copy everything he does, and he always does early birds, and I was always like, I'm really skeptical of the early birds. Thought it seemed complicated, but he made a pretty good argument to me that people get really excited about it, and it rewards people who get in early, and so I, on almost every level that I have, all the physical levels for this campaign, there are early bird rewards. So if you get in within the first 72 hours, you'll get a discount on the books. And I've never done it before to this scale. And on a few of my early campaigns, they did a couple. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes, depending on when you're listening to this. If you're listening early on, then But otherwise, hopefully, I've got high hopes.
Right. Cool. And so as you said, each one of your levels will have that open for the first 72 hours, and it's usually, looking at it, it's discounted. It's basically maybe like to a 10% discount on some of that stuff.
Yeah, it's like a good chunk of $5-10, maybe more on some of the higher levels, so hopefully that's appreciated by people who are getting in early. And of course, as like everyone knows, this sort of repeated ad nauseum around the Kickstarter community, but those early days are really critical to a campaign success. So, but I'm experimenting every time, trying to experiment with new things. Last time, the big experiment was the RPG, and that went incredibly well. People had a huge response, so I'm coming back with another one, and trying to iterate and do more things.
And so also too, would people be able to, through this Kickstarter, like you've done in your previous ones, can access your other titles as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. We've got Vampire Detective in Space, which there's 2 issues of out now, And then my anthologies that I did a little while back, Modern Mythology. There's 2 volumes of that, and people can pick that up. So yeah, totally.
So when you mentioned that Daryl kind of came up and kind of pitched the idea for what turned out to be issue 4, and then you were able to elaborate on that. Did that also give you some different world building ideas or different backstory ideas for the major characters?
Absolutely. Oh, 100%. I mean, one of the great things about Daryl, and you know, every artist, every team works differently, but Daryl is great because he cares about the story and he collaborates with me. We've had a lot of long conversations about the characters, and he has spent as much time, frankly, if not more than me, with those characters, right? Because of the hours that he's put in drawing them, and so he understands the characters as well as I do, and cares about where they're going, and he always has input for me, which is great. I mean, that's like a bonus. I don't pay him to edit my stories. But he does it anyway because he cares about it, which is awesome. Right. And so issue 4 really spun out of those conversations, portions of issue 5, and then because I originally wrote the story issue 1 through 5 as a graphic novel originally, the influence that Daryl has had has really crept into the ideas that are now forming for the second arc, the issue 6 through 10, issue 11 through 15, because of course as the story has changed, that has a ripple effect to where it's like the changes are greater further along the line. So there's big plots coming that are very influenced by the conversations that I've had with Daryl.
And how much of this also, as you talk about the ripple effect, that you've now had to explain more of the world building aspects of things as it kind of expands out? Because you started off with a concept of a character and then kind of built the world around it. And at what point do you as a writer have to get back to the character instead of spending a lot of time in the world building aspect of things?
So I try to keep everything centered on the characters. Right. And one of the things about Unicorn Vampire Hunter that I think works really well for that is that the world itself is a fantasy world that I think doesn't require a lot of explanation. Yes, this is a world in which there's unicorns are extinct and he's the only unicorn. There are certain little rules of magic that are unique to this world, but for the large part, it's like a kind of generic fantasy world, and that's intentional because I want it to be familiar. So when people see a centaur show up or a wisp show up,
right,
or whatever, they're not like, "Oh, what is this? You have to explain this to me." That they know what that is. You're reading a fairy tale, you know what that is, and so. I think that really allows me to put a heavy emphasis on the character. And sometimes I have to do world building stuff, but I try to tie it in as much as possible with the characters themselves. And the important things that happen in the world are very character driven. Right. So when we get into the next arc, there will, there'll be some more world building happening, but it will all coalesce back into the characters. And I also, I really write in a sort of decompressed style, which I know is not revolutionary. This is something that a lot of modern comic book writers do, but I really believe in less is more with each issue. I don't want to cram too much into an issue because I think giving the characters and the scenes room to breathe helps those characters develop better.
Right. And I know one point that you brought up in a previous interview too is you like to answer any questions that you pose. You want to wrap things up. So will this issue 5 also be a specific end so that issues 1 through 5 are a standalone, in a way, a standalone story arc?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, there's definitely like an end that's like a very obvious like tie-in or lead into the next arc, but the plot itself from issue 5, I mean, from the first 5 issues will very much be wrapped up. The questions will be answered, kind of brings everything to a close. And there really aren't big mysteries. Like I'm not J.J. Abrams. I'm not doing a mystery box style storytelling. I with the other series that I'm writing right now about the detective in space, there's more of a mystery element to it. But even in that, I tend to answer the questions that I pose really quickly, just because I don't feel like withholding information intentionally is clever storytelling. But that's just my opinion.
So as of this recording, so it's not live yet, but it's coming out on July 12th.
So lots of people, as we're recording, have signed up for that notification. So hopefully all those people will be getting that email. And if you're listening to this pre-recorded as podcast, we're live now. So, unicornvampirehunter.com is always going to redirect to whatever the most relevant current Unicorn Vampire Hunter thing is, which right now happens to be the Kickstarter.
Check it out. Make sure you get on there. If you get on there for the early bird, that'll be, get the good deals right there. And plus, classically too, the way you have it set up for the tiers, this is always to the point now where you're actually having issues 1 through 5. This is the better deal too. If you're wanting to catch up and actually read Unicorn Vampire Hunter for the first time, there's no better time or better deal to get all 5 issues. So Caleb, I'm looking at it. You came on episode 39. You came on episode 92, 115, and 142, and now 182. So you are the inaugural member of the Storycomic Presents 5 Timers Club. So now I'm going to make a logo and everything. And so awesome. Look at that. Congratulations. All right.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Well, once again, Caleb, thank you so much for coming on. This has been great. It's always a genuine pleasure to talk. And you always have some great comic book writer advice. So we really appreciate it. So once again, come back on again. So really enjoy it.
I'll be happy to come back on.
All right. Thank you. And I know I did back with your Vampire Hunter in Space. Unicorn Vampire Detective. No, but they have you. I know, and I gotta edit this part out too. I'm just like goofing around tonight. All right, because I know I did back your previous one because I really want.